guys, how are you? It is Dr. Deb, and it is Thursday night at 9 p.m., and that's why we're here for our regular Thursday night talk. Now, what I would like to know is who's out there? Who are my participants? Okay, great. So listen, guys, I am going to give you like a minute to get on, and then we're going to plunge right in. I always say I want to have interruptions. I want you to talk to me. I want your opinion. I want your thoughts. And if you have questions, by all means. So please go ahead and get going to start letting me know you're there and you have questions, comments. Oh, good. Hello, Dr. Deb. Great. I look forward to it too. I think it's going to be a good topic. I have to thank one of the members of our Facebook group for this word, Limerence. How many people out there have heard of it before? I can't put my hand up. I never did hear of it before myself. Maybe I'm just behind the times. I don't know. But it's a new word to me. Yeah, I never heard of it. So it was suggested by this one person who has actually taken the coaching program with me, and he felt like this would be a great topic. So I looked it up. What does that word mean? It means infatuation, an obsessive infatuation. But I think it means a little more than that. And as I said in my announcement, I prefer to look at it in terms of not the behavior. Yeah, it's obsessive infatuation, fine. But where does it come from? Why? Why would anybody have an obsessive infatuation with someone they don't even really know? Like you meet somebody at a party for 3 seconds. Can you possibly fall in love with that person? The only thing you could do is convince yourself that you have fallen in love with that person. But you can't actually know the person to know if you love them, which may be part of how it works, actually. If you don't know someone and they don't know you, then you can't have anything against each other. There's no list of flaws. So you're in dreamland and you can enjoy that place of dreamland because you don't know what's wrong with them or you, or they don't know you because they're meeting a need. Yeah, well, that's the thing. You don't think they feel it. You imagine they feel it. You're imagining something that you want. The same thing is true, and we have this in our country for the last 100 years, is the infatuation with stars. Some people have such an infatuation with stars that they follow them. They're groupies, right? They follow them all over and they watch all their performances and they go to every show they've done. Why? Why? Again, you're projecting onto them everything you want. Instead of like a little kid, I should have something on my desk. Oh, here. I have this for my little pieces of paper when I take notes. But here's a cute little pelican, right? So a little kid has like a pet, right? A toy, a stuffed doll that they love. How could you love this thing? Well, you're imagining it to be everything you want it to be. So the real question is, how does this happen? How do you get to that place where you need to involve a total stranger in your dreams? Why can't you just fall in love with a real person? Why can't you just have a real relationship? Well, a real relationship can be fraught with pain. And if you're in pain for that real relationship, the fantasy does a whole lot better. That still doesn't explain how does a person get to a place where that's the choice they're making. So I'm going to say it. I've said it before. Your family of origin primes you. And I've given the example when you put paint on the wall, you don't just start with a fresh coat of paint with a new color and say, oh, this is going to be beautiful. You have to sand down the old wall if it's a little shiny, like mine is, which is why it's not a great backdrop for my lighting. And I don't know what to do with that. But anyway, anybody with an experience in lighting can give me advice. I'd love it. Other than go buy a green screen. I'm not going and buying a green screen. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to do that. But anyway, you prime the wall with something called primer that makes the new coat stick. And the reason you have to prime the wall is if you don't, the new coat won't stick. The family you grew up in is your primer. It makes any kind of pain that the world is maybe going to dish at you stick better because you're so used to it. So your family of origin primes you, and then your marriage cements you to what? To what? To how you see yourself, to who you think you are. That's what. Somebody writes, does it have anything to do with nervous system regulation? The imagination is providing soothing. Sure. It's very soothing, just like the kid with the doll. It's very soothing to imagine something that isn't real rather than dealing with reality, because reality is very painful very often. But the point is, the most important source of the pain originated in a family that gave you a message that you weren't of value. Your family of origin gave you a message that you were not of value. That is how you got primed, so that any negative messages from your marriage would stick. And what I am trying to say here is the only way you can get out of this mess is to understand what happened. So let me give you an example. Let me give you actually two ways of testing whether this is true in your life or anybody that you know that you're worried about. So one way of testing it is Gottman's rules. Now, John Gottman is not actually a therapist. He is a researcher. I cited him in my dissertation because he was that thorough in his research. What he did, he's out in the West Coast in I'm not remembering what state. Maybe Oregon, Washington, somewhere out there in the West Coast. And he created what's called a love lab, which is he had a suite of rooms that volunteers could stay in for a weekend. And in every single room except the bathroom and bedroom, he would run tape recordings to hear their discussions, to hear what they'd say to each other. And he analyzed over a period of 20, 30, 40 years. It's getting on now, right? Years are going by. He started this decades ago. He analyzed tens and hundreds of thousands of hours of video recordings. And that's why I say he is a preeminent researcher, because he took the trouble to do all that work with so many people. There is a principle in research that if your sample size is large enough and representative enough, then you're going to be able to make conclusions about the general population. And so, after all that work, he came up with a very important rule. I don't know if any of my listeners have heard of what that rule is. Anybody want to type in? The rule goes like this. If you're fighting or if you're not fighting, in order for the marriage to last without a divorce, there must be 5 positive statements made to the other person for each negative statement. Not the other way around. 5 positives to 1 negative, even when you're having a fight. For example, well, my wife has been very good with the kids. That's an example. Or to speak to each other, you are very good with the kids. Or whatever. Any positive, not you look pretty today, although that possibly might count. Possibly. But not necessarily superficial statements. Okay. So a test you can put yourself through. Did that happen in your family of origin to you? Because even though this rule was created for the purpose of understanding couples, it shouldn't be significantly different from parents to children. If you are given positive statements, even if you are given occasional negative statements, you would have to come out with a fairly good impression of who you are as a human being. And if you had, on the other hand, too many negative statements, you would not think well of yourself. And that would prime you for a bad marriage. And it would prime you for this condition called limerence. Because if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't think well of yourself, how in the world can you expect another person to believe in you or think well of you? In fact, and I've heard this from people, if another person says, no, I love you, you're the best, the person with the low self-esteem doesn't even believe that's true. Doesn't believe that this person means it. Because they know they're not the best, so how could someone else think they are? A marriage can dissolve that way. So a person who is suffering from this terrible neediness will not find what they need from the person that they're clinging to. Whether they know them and marry them or it's an infatuation with a stranger, no matter who it is, it's not actually going to fill the gap inside. I made up a list of more tests. Number 1, do you call yourself stupid or other names? Number 2, in a list of things to do, to take care of, do you put yourself last? Number 3, do you do anything nice for yourself ever? Number 4, do you know how to get yourself out of a bad mood? Because if you're feeling down on yourself, you should have the skill of being able to say, I'm not that bad. Okay, I made a mistake. I insulted somebody or whatever. I forgot an appointment. Whatever the thing is, but you can also give yourself a little break. I'm not that bad. I'm not the world's worst human being. Or do you not know how to get yourself out of a bad mood? And finally, number 5, a basic question. Do you like yourself? Or do you hate yourself? Somebody wrote me on my website, which I post the same thing in Facebook that I post on my website, and people do find it. And somebody said, well, it was in response to a different announcement or a post that I wrote. They said, I hate myself. It's a terrible thing. People have said that to me here in Facebook as well, not on lives. I haven't heard that yet, but it's a feeling that people really do have. And this is where it comes from. So these are 5 tests of whether you might possibly be at risk for this needy love that the fancy people call limerence. And so now the question is, what do you do about it? If a person's at risk, because the person who made the request that I speak about this appears not to be on tonight, but that's okay. They will be able to watch it later. The same thing is available with the exact same link information. But they made that request because they wanted to know how to help, what to say or do to be of help to the person that's suffering from this. So the first thing they must do to help is to try to help that person get into therapy. Now, the problem with that is that people who are suffering from a lack of self-love are going to be terrified of therapy. It's a given, because they're afraid of looking inside and having it proven that they were right. They're terrible. They're horrible. They're no good. They're worthless. They're worse than worthless. They should never have been born. That's how bad they think they're going to find out that they are. They already believe it, but they don't want proof. And with a therapist, they're surely going to get the proof, because they're going to look inside, they're going to reflect, they're going to see how they are, and that is horrible. By the way, it is not for this topic, but I can't resist. That's how a person can become, instead of a needy lover, a narcissist. And a lot of the narcissists who are male are kind of the counterpoint of this needy lover, and often they are attracted to each other because they have the same inner neediness and emptiness. But the narcissist fills it by pretending they're great and believing it, and this limerence subject person fills it by clinging on to another person in their imagination as an infatuation object. But it's really the same inner emptiness that's causing it. So, a caution. Many people who are afraid of therapy are afraid for a good reason, because they've had therapists who were horrible and who basically told them, you're right, you're a piece of garbage. For example, I cannot count how many people have come to me as couples together telling me that they went to a previous therapist and the previous therapist said, yes, you should get divorced because the person you're married to is and then fill in the blank with some label. A narcissist, a sociopath, a borderline, a this and that, a third thing. They're no good. They'll never change. Listen to this. Oh, we have crystal balls nowadays. That's very good. What do you mean they'll never change? How do you know? What therapist has the right to say they'll never change? Really horrible. So, a caution. When you go to a therapist, you have to be very careful that you're going to somebody who isn't going to say stupid things. They're going to take you as you are, which means the good, as well as what you fantasize to be the bad. And we're going to look at the bad. And maybe the bad isn't so bad after all. Maybe you're just human. And just human doesn't mean you can get away with being mean or lacking in empathy. But it does mean that if that's how you are, okay, fine, so we'll fix that. You go to a therapist who has a roll up your sleeves and let's fix the problem attitude, rather than pointing a finger and saying, yeah, you really are as bad as you thought you were. But with the right kind of therapy, you're going to discover your and your parents' error of thinking, and possibly the person you're married to's error of thinking in how they judge you or themselves, because there are errors there. It's kind of like the error of the person who's already underweight and looks in the mirror and says, I'm fat. It's an error of thinking. It's the brain that's processing. The eyes are fine. They're seeing the person. The brain is processing it wrong. And so part of therapy is going to be working on your thinking and how you see the world and how did you get there, and putting things in proper perspective. It's not a quick and easy matter, but it's a necessary step. It's the way it should go. The next part of therapy is learning to treat yourself with the same kindness that you would treat others. It's kind of a reversal of the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. No. Do unto yourself just as nice as you do unto others. See, for that person, you need the reversal of the golden rule. And now we also have to go further. Give yourself some slack for mistakes because you are human. In other words, we can't whitewash a mistake. If a person says or does something that's wrong, we can't whitewash it. But what we can do is create balance. Okay, that was a mistake. You could forgive yourself. You could do good things in place of the mistake. You can resolve to use it as a learning platform from which to jump off to better things, but have balance about who you think you are. And finally, in therapy, you would start to learn to notice what you do right. Just notice it. Because a lot of times people don't do good reality testing. They see themselves as bad because they're not seeing the good. They're not seeing the good because it's not registering on them when they do good. I had a case of a person who was told that she was not smart. She was told that by her mother and she was told that by her husband. So every single time I said to her, well, you are smart. I would have to prove it. There. Do you see what you just did? You just took a rule that we talked about and you told me how you figured out a new use for that rule, a new application of it. That was brilliant. That's what I said to her. Now she walks out my door starting to look for the things she's done just like that. And I'll ask her, did you see it? The next time she comes in, did you see what you did that was good and smart? So noticing what you did right, as well as having a balance for what you did not do right, are all part of therapy. But the next question is, what can a friend do? What can a person do that's a friend or a lover that's concerned for this person who won't go to therapy because they're terrified of finding out how bad they really are? And besides suggesting therapy and explaining perhaps, well, you're right. Some therapists are horrible people and you should not go to them. They're toxic themselves and it would be a terrible thing for you to go to them. They can watch my videos. Find someone in your state who thinks the way I do. Reach out for help if you want, because I do have a directory list and I can direct you to online resources as well of IFS therapists and IFIO therapists, which is IFS for couples. So I can certainly direct you to the right person in your state. Or you can take my coaching course, which cuts across states. Aside from that, one thing you can do for someone you care about is be a safe landing place. What do I mean? What constitutes safety? Very tricky. You can't give a pep talk to someone who doesn't like themselves and say, oh, no, you are brilliant, which is what I just said I did, but I backed it up. And I'm the therapist. They want my opinion. And I always ask for permission. I say, well, can I share my views of you, what I've just observed? And I'll say, you just said X, Y, and Z. But then you've also told me A, B, and C. So here's how I reconcile them. This is what I do. I don't advise you to do that because you're not a therapist. You're not the therapist for this person. A safe landing place means you cannot contradict them. If they say, I am stupid or I'm worthless, you can't say, no, you're not. Because what you're doing is showing them that you don't get them, you don't understand them. And all they'll try to do is argue more for the position that they're already taking. So that's unsafe. Creating a feeling of belonging and connection, yes, exactly. Safe means you're not going to say something that's going to turn them upside down. So you be their friend for them. Be a safe person for them to talk to. And if a person listening to this later is not sure, how will I know? Think about all the other conversations you've had and see if something you said either upset them or shut them down. Either reaction shows that you weren't safe. Now, it could be that they got triggered by something that is totally not your fault. That can happen, but then there's nothing you can do about it. And even therapists are prone to have that happen. A person can come to a therapist who has the hair color of their grandmother or something that they didn't like. I don't know, I'm making that up, but it could be. Anything could happen. Number 3, don't argue with them and try to change their mind. Don't say to them, I know and I understand that you don't think you're a good person, but I have to tell you, I see it differently, I disagree, whatever. That's rude. Trying to change someone's mind is telling them that you don't respect their mind because it has to change. You can't do that. That's rude. That's another point. And so finally, it's important to do, I'd say my 4th recommendation is to help them with reality testing in a way that makes sense without scaring them and becoming unsafe. And the way I like to do it is by asking questions. So for an example, somebody was telling me that she thought she was not a good parent. She was very down on herself in that moment. And if they divorce, her husband should get the kids. Then the next day, the next time we met, she told me a story about how she handled one of her kids. So I said, in your opinion, I'm mentioning here, your opinion, not my opinion. In your opinion, was that good parenting? And she said, actually, yes, it was. So I said, okay, because you said the other day that you didn't think you were a good parent. I just want to draw to your attention that you were probably not in a good frame of mind. I'm happy to hear you say this now because I would agree. I think that was very good. So when you ask questions that make a person reflect in a way that's a little deep, but not going too deep where you're being a therapist again, it helps them with reality testing. Things are not so bad. They are not so bad. Now, whatever you do, we get back to that safe landing place. Don't do it with the wrong tone of voice and give away the fact that you've become upset with them if you have. Because we're all human, and you might very well become upset with them. And if that's the case, you absolutely do not want the wrong tone of voice. So when you ask a question, it's got to be real. For an example, do you really believe that? That's not a question. You're not asking them if they really believe that in that tone of voice. You're putting them down. So watch your own tone of voice, watch your own emotions, because you're not helping them with the wrong ones. Now, I have just run up to my 30-minute program here. Is anybody out there? Does anyone have questions, comments? I see a lot of comments by one person. Anybody else? And some people, I understand, do not want their participation to show. And I mentioned in the announcement that you could come on with a different name. You can make up your own account or the same account with a different channel and come on here with that so that it will disguise your name and keep your anonymity that way. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for attending. Be well. Have a wonderful evening.